Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to another Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Session. We're excited today about our session, and it's coming from none other than Tyler Wertman, and the topic is chord, scale practice, and approaches on trombone. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please use that chat feature there, and we'll make sure we reserve some time to answer those questions for you. And don't forget, if you would like to check out any future sessions, you can go to www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. And if you have any suggestions for us for any topics, email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com. So thank you so much for coming today. Just a little bit about our presenter today. Tyler, he's a jazz trombonist, and he's special to us here at Clearwater Jazz Holiday. He's done so many sessions for us. Let me just name a few. Basic trombone fundamentals, long tones and lip slurs, how important that is. Basic trombone fundamentals, how about major scales, arpeggios, and practice? I know this was a good one, an approach to improvisation on the trombone. We can never know too much about that. Learning to develop your own personal sound on the trombone. So those were great sessions. And just a little bit about him. He's a composer, performer, producer, which focuses on the jazz and classical styles. He performs with all groups and ensembles which have taken him on many, many travels. If you don't know that he is also an adjunct faculty professor at the Bauer School of Music of Florida Gulf Coast University, that he's primarily the director of the FGCU basketball band and teaches the FGCU student brass quartet as well, and the student jazz combo too. He's a very busy guy. He does private lessons as well, and he's the assistant instructor for the FGCU big band. So he's also an instructor at the music department of Music University of Tampa, where he's presently teaching Introduction to Jazz. He received his Bachelor's of Arts in Music from FSU and a Master's of Music and Jazz Studies from USF. So that's just a little bit about Tyler today. And before we go into it, we do want to thank all our sponsors today. You know, this is brought to you by our friends over there at Blue Water Wealth Management, at Stewart Partners, and Duke Energy, as well as Young Lion Podcast. You can also check that out wherever it's streaming, and that's brought to us by our friends at MarineMax Clearwater. So check us out anywhere where you can search any kind of virtual streaming. So Tyler Wertman, guess what?
How you doing?
The stage is all yours.
All right. Now, thank you so much for that introduction, Mike, especially coming from you. It's been too long since we last seen each other. So I just want to say again, thank you to all of our sponsors and Clearwater Jazz for putting this event on and helping the education community with jazz, right? For all ages. And that's sort of what this lesson or lecture is going to be approaching, sort of chord scale practice for all ages. Okay. This is not something that is strictly for advanced professionals, and this is not something that's strictly for beginners learning the trombone. Everyone should be sort of practicing their fundamental scales as well as combining that with their chord relationships. Okay. We've talked a little bit about major scales in the past, right? We've had a whole lecture on that. So I'm going to be reviewing some of those topics as well. Now, what we sort of talked about in that lecture was understanding that all 12 keys are very important, okay, vital, to say the least. We don't want to have an unfamiliar key or key center be a weak point in our playing. So one way we need to sort of do this is by practicing our 12 major scales. Okay. This is something we've, have been doing for just about the entirety of our playing, something that we first do when we sit down on the instrument. We need to learn generally concert C, concert B flat major scale. Now, Why is this important? It sort of develops that muscle memory in our playing so that we can continue, okay, to advance. Now, this muscle memory is, again, just as important as the 12 keys, because if we can strengthen our muscle memory, we don't necessarily have to think about this while we're playing, such as alternate positions on trombone, right? When we're playing our major scales, this is something we've been doing hopefully for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, so we don't need to do things exactly the same. Okay, we can practice alternate positions, different tonguing styles or articulation as well. And now we're practicing three things, right? Scales, tonguing, articulation, right? Instead of just, let me just run my concert B flat major scale. So it's all about sort of practicing efficiently here. Now, let's just play our B flat major scale. And then I'm going to show you something that we can do to enhance the harmonic values. Okay, so this is B flat major. I'm going to play all staccato quarter notes, okay, at a very relaxed tempo, around 85 to about 100, okay? 1, 2, 3. Now, something that I tried to do at the end of every note was try to incorporate an open release. Okay, so that means I'm not stopping my tongue with my, or excuse me, I'm not stopping the air with my tongue. I'm letting the air control itself, right? In the major scale practice, we talked about our block of sound, how the tongue only does maybe 20% of the work when involved with producing our initial note, right? The air and the tongue match up at the exact same point to develop the t articulation. It's not t or ta, right? So the tongue and the air meet at the exact same point, and that's just about all the work the tongue needs to do. From there, the air takes over. Ta. It's not, the tongue has no further function from there. So the air is important to develop the strength in the body of our note. Now what's left is the release, okay? And now don't let the tongue come into play here. Let the air control itself, okay? Have that quick air control like a pressure washer, right? So when you turn on a pressure washer, it immediately goes at a very high speed. But what happens when you let go? It immediately cuts off as well. That's the sort of control we're aiming for with our air for every one of these sort of staccato quarter notes. Now, something else to do to advance this is to practice our scales, not just to the root or octave, but to extend this to the ninth interval. Okay, so this is going to sound like this. So by extending our scale up to our ninth, we've actually created an extension now. Okay, now what can we do with this ninth interval? Well, one thing we can do is look at our triads within our scale. Okay, and with our major scale session that we did, we talked about diatonic triads just a little bit. Now, what diatonic means, okay, it means there are intervals or inside the scale. Okay, so right now we're in B flat. Everything diatonic is going to be inside B flat major. Okay, now with our triads, it's important, one, to understand what they are. So a triad is the 1, the 3rd, and the 5th notes of our scale. So if we were to isolate these on piano, it would sound like this. Okay, and again, this is just 1, 3, and 5. but I can't play 3 notes without doing some other things on trombone. So instead, we need to hear this sound as we're practicing. Now, it's important to sort of isolate the triads of these 12 keys before going into anything further. Okay, we need to sort of understand these 12 major scales up to the root before you go to the 9, then incorporate your 9th, and then understand the triads 1, 3, 5 of each scale. Now we're going to get to chords in just a second, trust me, but we're not done here with the building blocks of scales. So from our triads, okay, we can extend to 7th chords or a major 7th chord. Okay, so within our major 7th chord, it's 1, major 3, 5, and major 7. Now, these notes played together will give you a sound like this. For reference, here's the triad. So you hear that 7th on top, okay, giving it just a bit more color. Okay, this is the exact same principle that we did when we incorporated our 9th to our scale exercise. However, this is with chords. Okay, so I hope you're starting to see the similarities in function of just extensions now. Okay, and this goes beyond extensions. So by practicing your major 7th chords for every major scale, okay, you should understand you have 12 major 7th chords. Okay, so from that, you can extend that major 7th chord to a major 9th chord. Okay, so I'll play major 7th into major 9th. Major 9th. And just as I was playing them up, you should practice them inverted as well. Again, picking a nice, even, relaxed tempo in one single articulation to practice. It's very important. Why are we picking one articulation? For consistency. Okay, it doesn't really help if we're tonguing, slurring, accenting, and things aren't even for our practice. Now, let's talk about diatonic motion. Okay, so within our major scale, we have 8 intervals, right? So if we isolate 1, 3, 5, and we move that up our scale, we have 2, 4, 6. Okay, so 1, 3, 5 is our triad. It sounds like this. 2, 4, 6 is another triad, which is C minor. Sounds like this. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that motion. And if we were to continue going up, what would it be? 3, 5, 7, which is D minor. Okay, so we played minor 3, minor 2, major 1. Okay, and if we keep on going up, we have major 4, major 5, minor 6, okay, and diminished 7. Now, we need to isolate these on our instrument. And we need to do them a few different ways, just like our scales. Now, I'm a trombone player. I can't play chords per se, but one thing I can do is isolate those intervals of our chords on trombone with a consistent tempo and a consistent articulation. And those intervals will in play go into my sound, my hearing, my ear, and I will be able to understand and pull those intervals out for a solo if need be. Okay, and we'll go more into soloing in just a bit here. So playing these diatonic triads of just 1, 2, and 3 will sound like this. Okay, And hopefully you notice I played quarter, quarter, half note, quarter, quarter, half note, and 4/4 time. Okay, this sort of gives me a clear starting point for each triad. Okay, and again, consistency is key. Now, the name of the game is to play this all the way up. Okay, so at the end, it was just all quarter notes, right? But going up, I played quarter, quarter, half, quarter, quarter, half. Okay, so this is something you guys can practice at home. You can create different rhythms for your diatonic triads, ascending and descending as well. Now, another thing, once you've mastered that we can incorporate is inverting the ascending and descending triads. Okay, so we can go up and then down, which will sound like this. Okay, or we can go down and then up. Now, I'm just playing up to the 4, just for example purposes, but extend this, okay, all the way up to your root. Now, it's important to practice, okay, ascending, descending, and your inversion methods as well, because all of this is material that will come out in our playing, or at least give us access to these roots. Now, this is only for our major chords. Now, one thing we can do to extend harmony is maybe incorporating different modes into our practice. Okay, so from major, I would recommend going into our Mixolydian mode here, which is our 5th mode, incorporating only one note that is different, which is our 7th scale degree. Okay, what is different is in Mixolydian, the 7th scale degree is flattened or lowered 1/2 step. Okay, so in B flat, our major 7th is concert A. If we were playing a B flat Mixolydian scale, our 7th note would be A flat. Okay, so apply this for all 12 scales now, and we're only changing one note. Okay, and then from here, possibly go into Dorian minor. Okay, so what changed from Mixolydian mode into Dorian mode? We added a flat 3 now. Okay, so we're practicing flat 3 and flat 7 while still incorporating the other notes from major. Okay, and then for extended studies, go into your melodic minor, diminished modes as well. Now, something that's really cool that I like to maybe explore with is, how to approach a blues. Now, there's a few different ways to approach improvising on a blues. And it starts with learning the chords and scales. Okay, now in a 12-bar blues form, we have a lot of dominant chords. Okay, so what does that tell us to sort of understand? Well, that tells us we need to understand our Mixolydian modes very well. Okay, we need to understand the roots, the thirds, the fifths. Okay, we need to understand the 7ths as well, and the triads within these chords, because then that can give us access to other playing material. Okay, so maybe try expanding just from our triads, okay, into triad pairs. Now, this is a great example that I really enjoy playing in my solos as well, because it's a way to keep the harmony, okay, but to sort of play either rhythmically with the group or expand or keep as controlled motion as possible. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So for my triad pairs, I'm going to do pairs of 1 and 2. Okay, so again, think of our 2 triads in B flat major, that's B flat, D, and F, and our 2, which is C minor, C, E flat, and G. So it'll sound like this. So it gives you a really different sound. Okay, now if we change one note from our triad, it'll expand and change this sound completely. Now, remember, those were 2 triads of 1 and 2. So now what I'm going to do is change one note, which is on our 2. Instead of it being a minor triad, I'm going to change that chord to a major triad. So we're going to play major 1 and now major 2. Let's listen to this sound. So you're able to pull now a Lydian sound by just changing one note of our second triad. Okay, so now we're practicing B flat major and C major together. Okay, so think about these intervals that we're playing. B flat, D, F. Well, we sort of talked about that already. That's 1, 3, and 5 of our triad. But now let's look at our 2 chord, okay, C major here. Well, C, we've played our scales up to the 9th. So if we kind of extend that 9th note, what is that? That is C. And then let's think about these notes. E natural, okay, that's not found in B flat major, but it is found in B flat Lydian, which means we have a raised 4th scale degree. Okay, and we have our 13. So instead of playing this sound for over and over and over again, we're playing this sound. Okay, there's a lot more color involved in that sound. Why? Because we're playing more extensions. Now, if we were to practice this, okay, with a rhythm section or a band that, you know, at school, how would we sort of do this? Well, start slow. Start with our triads, okay? Diatonically, you know, can you solo just using diatonic triads, okay? Or restrict yourself even more. Can you solo just using triads? This is actually really tough to do, guys, by restricting your notes or your phrases. You have to think rhythmically now, okay? And this rhythmic principle is only going to heighten your playing further when you add different notes, different modes, different, you know, lines into your playing from here. So let's start with an F blues, okay? And I'm just going to take a 1-chord solo using all triads. Okay, so this is a solo using only 1, 3, and 5 of our chord changes here. Right, so I can't do too much. I'm pretty restricted in what I can play. Okay, but the information that I play needs to be either 1, 3, or 5. Now, something that's important to keep in mind here is phrasing. right? We want to keep phrasing going. We don't necessarily just want to sound like, and then just keep on going. We want to have some sort of motion, okay, some idea happening within our time. Okay, so from here, maybe open it up into a triad pair of 1 and 2. Okay, 2 being, in this case, we'll just do minor 2. Okay, so now this gives me 3 more notes to sort of play with now. And well, let's backtrack a little bit. Before we get to the 3 edition, I'm going to add 1 note, okay, by adding the 7th. Okay, so that was the triad first that you just heard. Then I'm going to add 1 note and play only the 7th chords. And then I'm going to do the triad pairs of 1 and 2, allowing me to play up to 6 notes within a scale. Okay, so I'm going to play those 3 for you now. So I hope you could sort of hear the harmonic progression and sort of evolution of just that triad to adding a 7th or the 7th chord, right? And then incorporating just a bit more opportunity with the triad pairs of 1 and 2. Okay, now to sort of go back and play some of our examples that we've played of our triad pairs, ascending, descending, inverted. These are things to practice in our solos as well. Okay, can you maybe incorporate descending, ascending, triad ideas? Okay, so let's try an example, 1 chorus example of this now. Again, so this is only going to be examples of our triads. So I'll go back and play our example. Right, so that was all ascending triads. So what can I do with that now? So let's see. Right, so it's a little different, right? By incorporating or forcing ourselves to, only play a triad, only play a 7th chord, only play 2 triads. It forces us to sort of get into a different mindset. And this is the practice that needs to be had, okay? Because you need to understand your playing if it's only, a major sound. What is the best major sound or best ideas you can come up with here, okay? What are some shapes you can develop, right? If you guys heard me play on the blues example, That's 5, and I was playing my minor 2 triad down back to the 5. That's all that is, right? So I'm just trying to think of different ways to perform these ideas. And again, perform these ideas, but we cannot perform without practicing, without isolating, these inversions, these diatonic triads, excuse me, going through our different modes, Mixolydian, Dorian, just all of these different modes, melodic, minor, diminished, they're crucial, okay, augmented, in isolating them. How do we isolate them? Well, start simple, right? Start with the triad, the 1, 3, and 5, expand from there. What's the 7th doing? What is the 5th doing? And then from there, are there extensions? What are some extensions that can be played, right? Because you'll find over a dominant chord with a major third, there's, natural extensions found in tertian harmony that you cannot imply over your minor chord. Okay, so it's up to you and your playing to sort of understand those changes. Okay. And the more we practice and we isolate and we run sort of these scales and chords, the more familiar we're going to be with our playing. So, hey, Mike, do you got any questions regarding all that stuff?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for just really digging into the theory and the science behind some of the great stuff that we hear you and some of the awesome musicians do on their instruments. And I think sometimes players, they take for granted the work behind the scenes that it takes to produce that sound. So that kind of segues me into my question, whether you're a seasoned musician or young up-and-coming musician, somebody may be a beginner, how important is it to balance, say, transcribing, listening to players and picking up licks, balancing that with actually digging into the theory of like the major chords and knowing your scales and the ninths and the sevenths and the modes? How important is it to balance those both of those factors?
Well, man, it's crucial. It absolutely is crucial now. In one way, we need one to do the other, right? We need sort of that understanding of theory to hear what these great musicians are doing, or else we're going to be left in the dark a lot. Oh man, he played this, but I didn't know what it was. Or, oh man, did you hear that tritone substitution that he played into that 4 chord? Now we're starting to engage our ear. Okay, so now we talk about the transcription process. Now, what do you get out of this? Well, a player's sound, a player's approach to soloing. Okay, their energy over a certain chorus of chord changes, right? And that energy, the way they approach, the way they play, might attract your ear. Okay, now what is attracting your ear is equally important to understand. Is it their fire that they're playing with? Is it their sound? Is it their cleanliness of articulation? Is it their harmonic ideas? Okay, there could be 1,000 different things, but what is it that's catching your ear to this artist, to this group, to this song? That's equally as important as understanding the theory. Now, when you combine them, that's when you can really make music. If you're isolating one over, or not isolating, if you're, doing one more than the other, it can, it will prohibit you from moving forward. Right. If you're just in the theory books, reading about all your different modes of melodic minor and all of that, and you're not translating that to playing, well, you're going to be, missing out on some things. Just as if you're sitting there, transcribing giant steps from John Coltrane, but you're not looking at Naima or any of his other recordings as well, you're going to be missing a lot from his playing. Okay. And it's just that balance, that understanding that theory is crucial. Why? Because it's knowledge. Okay, it's literally vocabulary words, and our solos are a textbook or a novel that we wrote. Right? We need to have proper sentence structure, all of this, or else no one's going to read a book. No one's going to, take the time to sort of view our thoughts, just like no one's going to take the time to listen to our solos. Okay, so again, it's a voice, but just, as powerful a voice may be, there needs to be proper vocabulary behind that voice. And so that's sort of that balance of theory and transcription, I believe.
Awesome. That was a great answer. I like the way you break that down. Question. So as a musician that's out, say, gigging, and maybe you're doing improv sessions, or you're doing, just jam sessions, how quickly can you identify in someone's playing if they've been neglecting the theory aspect? Is there a certain sound where you can say, okay, this person has a great sound, but they're not understanding the changes? We always hear about changes, and especially young players, that is the instant thing that scares them. When you say changes, they say, oh my goodness, it's theory. Can you hear that in a player?
I do believe your harmonic knowledge is evident whenever you play, right? We can hear phrases, we can hear bebop phrases, we can hear blues phrases, we can hear swing phrases, but it's that connection with harmony that lets these phrases sort of interact with each other. If you're just quoting certain things and quoting certain things, and you're not really diving into some of these key areas maybe differently each time, that does stand out to my ear as a more advanced listener. Now, I would much rather hear a musician go up and perform an improvised solo with material of them attempting, their 100% best, trying to play different material and, as well as related natural phrasing material, instead of someone who's going up there quoting Kenny Garrett, Roy Hargrove, all night long. Now, the energy is great. Again, transcription, right? We just talked about they're transcribing these lines and things like that, but they might not be connecting this material harmonically, just like these great musicians do. Now, it's because it's tough. You can hear it, but really, what are we listening for? Thirds and sevenths, right? We need to be influenced by these chord changes, and if a player isn't giving me, these basic fundamentals of each chord, it's pretty evident that they haven't spent as much time looking at the theory, the harmonic side of the chord progression, I believe.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I say that because once in a while I run by a musician that cannot break down what they're playing, but man, they're phenomenal. They're playing it all, and then if you say, hey, so what did you do right here? I mean, what chord? They can't tell you. So I guess that's the debate of, when we're listening, and I always used to tell my students, that tone is the first thing that people hear. And you mentioned that with fundamentals, but do your sound help gravitate the listener towards you? And sometimes it's not all about your technical studies. It's just, what are you saying as an individual musician out of your horn or your instrument? How unique is your sound? So
absolutely. And just to add on that real quick, that's what we're taking from these exercises. We don't want to sound like we're playing exercises, right? We want to be performing. How do we do that? Well, we incorporate these exercises, but we find ways for us to personally play them. And that's one way just to develop, your sound. And if we don't practice these things, major seventh chords, diatonic triads, don't expect for those things to magically come out of thin air into your solo. Okay. It takes time for those things to happen. And for the players that do get caught up in it and are almost transcended to that other level, well, if they're really performing and they're playing, man, kudos, but if it's a student that I know maybe, was in a different area, one way I would encourage them is to record themselves, again, to understand their tendencies, when the energy is very high. What do what's in your bag, so to speak? Do you have, a couple different tools to pull out, or do you only have, two things that you do over these areas?
Well, you know what? Before we wrap up, I mean, you said something powerful there. You said, record yourself. You would be amazed of how many musicians, whether they are phenomenal or they're just kind of novice at things, they hate listening to their recordings. But what I always say, recordings don't lie. If you want an unbiased look, a snapshot of what you're doing, record it, because that recordings, it's not going to make you feel better about things. Let's say that.
No, it's the truth, man. It's the God's honest truth, because that's what happened. There's no lying on the recording. And I just encourage my students to do this in every single one of their playing opportunities. It's crucial. You can always go back and upload stuff, delete, space on your phone. But these recordings should last forever. For me, I have lessons, from Paul McKee back in 2011, 2012, that I still go back and I listen for. Not necessarily to hear what I was playing, right, 10 years ago, but what he was playing over these tunes that we're working on, all of his information and knowledge that went right over my head. And from that, it never stops. Every lesson opportunity, every time you get to play, it's a time for you to really record, listen, and reflect, and you will gain more from that.
Absolutely. And speaking of recordings, don't forget, everyone who's listening, you can always go back to past sessions we recorded here at Clearwater Jazz, or, check out the up and coming sessions and go to our website, www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. And there's a wealth of information in this place. So if you've enjoyed what Tyler's shared with us today and you want to hear more, go back and listen to his sessions and all the other great musicians and educators that have come through to share their knowledge. So we want to thank you today, Tyler. It's so good seeing you again. I can't wait to get back out there and play and help teach the young ones again with you. And just a reminder, everybody, keep telling more people about what you're experiencing here. And we hope to see you on the next one. Have an awesome day. We'll see you next time.